Iran and the United States seem to be on the brink of restarting an all-out war. But after 13 days of attacks, the U.S. guns have fallen silent, and Tehran says it will also suspend its retaliatory attacks. It seems, for now, that both sides are giving diplomacy a chance. Mike Waltz, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, says there's still room for a deal between Washington and Tehran. Let's have a listen.
As the president said, we are locked and loaded. Even more assets are going into theater. But he's giving talks some space. He's giving it a little bit of room. We've had both Oman and Iran and a number of our other negotiators engaged at every level, from the most senior levels all the way down to the technical level over the past few weeks, and particularly in the past few days.
So after almost 2 weeks of renewed violence, why are both sides coming back to the negotiating table? Are we any closer to a deal to end this conflict? And if not, what are the sticking points? Those are the questions we're going to try to answer with Alan Eyre. He's a distinguished diplomatic fellow at the Middle East Institute and a former member of the U.S. nuclear negotiating team. So, Alan, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for asking me, Aaron.
So as we just heard, Mike Waltz says President Trump is giving talks some space despite Trump's rhetoric of the past few days. So is this a genuine shift in the U.S.'s approach or more of a strategic pause by Washington?
I hope it's a shift in approach because I hope the U.S. administration has finally realized that it cannot, by means of military strikes alone, get Iran to capitulate on some key red lines that Iran has. President Trump resumed military strikes when it came to pass that the U.S. and Iran had differing interpretations of what it meant for Iran to control passage of maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. That quickly escalated. But now, as you said, after 12 or 13 days, I think both sides have realized that ongoing bombing isn't really going to change anything. So, as Ambassador Waltz said, they're going to give diplomacy another chance.
Now, let's stay for that point for just a second. U.S. media reports suggest some of Trump's advisors were concerned about air defense stockpiles and the U.S.'s military readiness if more hostilities continued. Now, we know the advisors are worried about that, but do you think that message has really been driven home for the White House? Does Trump believe that as well?
Well, I can't fathom a guess as to what President Trump believes, but it does seem to be the case that there were two key salient facts. One, we were getting relatively low on missile interceptors, missile defense. And two, the military advisors were telling President Trump that continued military bombing would not affect Iran's strategic decision-making calculus, in addition to the fact that the U.S. was running out of targets.
Now, all of this, of course, hasn't stopped Donald Trump from rattling the digital saber on his Truth Social platform. Now, on Sunday, he posted dozens of AI-generated images threatening further military action against Iran, among them an image showing an attack on Iran's oil hub, Karg Island. So how should we interpret these messages? Are they part of his negotiating strategy, or do you think he's just going rogue?
Again, President Trump, I think the Trump administration has a challenge with message discipline. This is one of the reasons why the Iranians are finding it so hard to negotiate with the United States, is that the United States is inconsistent in its position, and President Trump tends to use social media for a wide variety of purposes, almost none of which are strategic. So I think the Iranians have learned to do what many of us in the U.S. have learned to do, which is just ignore these social media postings.
So what kind of concessions do you think Washington is looking for from Tehran in these current negotiations?
Well, what caused the war to flare up again, Aaron, was the sticking point on Article 5 of the MOU, which said that Iran would, and I forget the exact phraseology, but maritime traffic would resume through the strait with Iranian arrangements. Iran interpreted that as it being able to manage, control, administer the flow of ships in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. But then shortly after that MOU was premiered, the U.S. took steps to move traffic without coordination with Iran, hugging the Omani coast, the southern route it's called, as opposed to what Iran was forcing ships to do, which is move through the strait in Iranian territorial waters, Iranian coastal waters on the north side. Because don't forget, if this is the strait, the center's mined. The place that ships used to go through, the deepest part, is mined. No one's going through there. So you have two options: the Omani side, which the Iranians don't like, and the Iranian side, which the U.S. didn't like. So when the Iranians, at the start of implementation of MOU, started routing all traffic exclusively through the Iranian side and started attacking ships that went through the Omani side, that's what set this off. The key question is the U.S. going to modify its position or work with Oman and the GCC countries to find some sort of middle way whereby Iran can administer the strait in conjunction with Oman? Because it's clear to me, at least, and I've been following Iran for 40 years, that they're not going to budge on this red line.
So if I understand you correctly, if there is going to be any budging, any movement on this issue, it's going to have to come from Washington. Is that correct?
Well, I think, let me put it this way. There's a solution to be had. There's a diplomatic solution to be had. This is what negotiators do. You find a solution that satisfies or equally dissatisfies both sides. The problem is the U.S., this U.S. administration is not good at that, is not that interested in doing that. It's outsourced its diplomacy to Qatar, to Pakistan, to Turkey, to Egypt. So if those countries can find a solution that meets both U.S. and Iranian red lines, then all the U.S. has to do is just give it a thumbs up.
And is the major sticking point here is control of the Strait of Hormuz, but where does that leave issues like sanction relief or, of course, the nuclear question, which kind of started this entire conflict to begin with?
Yeah, I think the nuclear issue is very likely to be resolved in any time soon. That can has been kicked so far down the road. I think President Trump feels the Trump administration feels it's stuck in a quagmire and just wants to extricate itself as quickly as it can. But it can't do that unless maritime traffic escalates back to close to what it was before the war, because you're not going to be able to open the strait with a soundbite. Before the war started, before the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran, there were 100 to 130 ships going through the strait every day. We've got to get back close to that. And the problem is now, after all these months of war, our economic system has lost resilience. You know, the price of oil is up, but due to the refinery shortage, price of gasoline, price of diesel, jet fuel, heating oil, the system has lost a lot of resilience. And so going forward, if the strait continues to be closed or significantly constricted, the world economy is going to have a step increase in pain.
Well, doesn't that give the Iranians more of a position of power, a longer lever, if you will, for some of the negotiations? I mean, Trump is staring down the barrel of the midterm elections in the United States. This is an incredibly unpopular war in the U.S. It's a very expensive one as well. The Iranians have shown that they're willing to wait out painful situations like this. Does this give them an advantage in the current round of talks?
Well, there's a dynamic here, Aaron. It's called the two clocks issue. On the one hand, as you point out, every day the strait is closed or constrained, it's like a blood vessel being partially clotted. You're right. It's going to cause more and more pain. But there's another blockade going on, which is the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports, which is still in place. And that's causing serious economic damage to Iran. So the question becomes, who cries uncle first? Who feels so much pain first that they move their red lines closer to the other? As you point out, midterm elections are coming up. The global economy is affected by the closure of the strait. In Iran, the people running Iran aren't running for re-election, and they've shown that they're willing to kill thousands of their own people if those people rise up and start to protest. So looking at this two clocks issue, I think, as you asked in your question, Iran has the advantage.
And where does this leave Israel? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is due to meet with Trump this week. How closely do you think Washington and Jerusalem are aligned on what the next step should be?
Not aligned at all. That's one of the problems facing Israel, is that Israel started this war telling President Trump that with the decapitation strikes and a couple of days of shock and awe bombing, the problem would go away, that it would be like what the U.S. did in Venezuela. That clearly was not the case, and now President Trump is stuck in this quagmire. But the strategic goals now of the two countries are quite different. President Trump just wants to extricate himself from the mess he created by getting this strait open as quickly as possible. As I said, I don't think any sort of nuclear deal is likely. Israel still wants for the Islamic Republic of Iran to go away, to topple. It sees Iran as an existential threat to Israel. So it doesn't want the U.S. to negotiate any sort of agreement with Iran. It wants to topple, to destabilize, to do away with the Islamic Republic. And that's a wide gap between U.S. goals and Israeli goals.
So where does that leave us? After 13 days of conflict, we now have seen 2 days of relative calm. People are coming back to the negotiating table. But at the exact same time, you say two different clocks of pressure are running. How do you see this developing in the short term? Do you think there is the potential there for some type of deal which could see us moving closer towards a long-term resolution of this conflict?
I don't think there will be a long-term resolution of this conflict. I mean, it seems quite possible that President Trump will seek to avoid future military action and rely on the economic naval blockade of Iran to cause so much pressure that Iran capitulates on its red lines. That's one option. The other option is that President Trump and the countries working for a diplomatic solution find some sort of arrangement with the Strait of Hormuz that satisfies Iran and satisfies the U.S. And Oman and the other Gulf countries. But here's one of the collateral issues. For example, Oman has said, we're fine with the tolling system on ships passing through, but it has to be voluntary. Iran says, no, it has to be mandatory. Because again, Iran needs money. It knows it's not going to get any real money from the United States. It's not going to get a $300 billion reconstruction and development fund. It's not going to get sanctions lifted. And even if they are lifted for a couple of days or waived, they know the U.S. can just reimpose it. And so they're not going to get most of their assets unblocked, probably. So where is Iran going to get the money it needs to rebuild its defense industrial base and also to give money to its people, whose economy was horrible before the war even started? Monetizing and weaponizing control of the Strait of Hormuz seems to be their answer.
All right, that was Alan Eyre, a distinguished diplomatic fellow at the Middle East Institute. Thanks for joining us. Whether it's a strategic pause or a space for diplomacy, the war, now in its 5th month, remains largely unpopular in the United States. Tell us why you think this is in our comment sections. And don't forget to follow DW News on major social media platforms to get the latest news and updates. That's all for now. Thanks for joining us.